I think a lot of you guys feel me when I say that every single time I look at one of the SEC's cases in the crypto space, I want to slam my head against a brick wall. And the only reason I'm not is because I hope at some point they're going to be caught out, and every single one of them straight to jail.
You're stealing, right to jail. You're playing music too loud, right to jail, right away. You're driving too fast, jail. Slow, jail. You're charging too high prices for sweaters, glasses, you right to jail.
I didn't unmute my microphone. So I spend hours a week going through these different cases when in reality I know one thing, and that's that every single thing is garbage, dog-tier garbage. I know I sound like a negative Nancy, but can you imagine my frustration if you have to read the same type of stupid argumentation from the same kind of corrupt agency time and time again? Every single time I see one of these authors write why the SEC's tactics are ineffective, predatory, and should not be allowed. And every single time, what do I see in response? SEC gains major support in the Coinbase legal brawl. Apparently they're getting support. I didn't know it was possible, but yes, there are companies and there are people who literally say the SEC is doing a good job. You can see Ripple's chief legal officer finds so much wrong in the SEC's Coinbase brief, but I guess let's start at the beginning. 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗧 said, how do you know that a federal court should dismiss an SEC enforcement action under major questions doctrine when pro-SEC boosters are scared enough to write an ineffectual amicus brief begging, please don't? 3 reasons why this brief gives me confidence that Coinbase will win. 1. The breakthrough hypocrisy of the same author writing a 22-page paper last month arguing that Congress should pass new laws addressing crypto, directly contradicting the argument in this brief that the issue is already settled law. Last month, quote, this essay argues that crypto skeptics' big bet on the Supreme Court declaring crypto tokens to be securities subject to the securities laws is incredibly risky. Members of Congress should put forward legislation to codify the existing Howey test, end quote. And today, Congress has already decided this question by granting the SEC jurisdiction to bring suits that allege that certain assets are securities, end quote. Which is it? Does Congress need to pass new laws because the Supreme Court will side with Coinbase, or has Congress already answered this question? I'll place my bet on the former, as logic and common sense require that Congress didn't clearly and intentionally give the SEC authority to regulate blockchain-based digital assets back in the 1930s. 2. The obvious invalidity of the argument that the major questions doctrine should not apply to civil enforcement actions. And if you look through this video, you didn't open Google yet to ask yourself, what exactly is the major questions doctrine? Use any one of these definitions. In short, the major questions doctrine would handcuff an expert agency explicitly tasked by Congress to address significant and evolving issues. And there's a big battle about whether or not this is typical or even useful at that. Mark Fago, I believe ex-SEC, said, sorry, but invoking this doctrine in the context of litigated enforcement action is nonsensical. They just said it more politely and patently. Statutes must be construed in litigated enforcement actions. Major questions doctrine is a canon of statutory construction. Saying it doesn't apply is beyond nonsensical. And you can kind of continue on this tangent here for a little bit. That is quite controversial, to say the least. And now, if you're wondering who exactly joined the SEC side, who wants to sit on that sinking ship, it's the United States Securities and the North American, specifically, Securities Administrators Association, who basically joined the lawsuit as a friend of the court. That basically tries to state that these digital assets that are being talked about here should not be treated somehow special, and that even though it's about a crypto exchange here rather than a specific cryptocurrency, it shouldn't be treated in a crazy fashion. Because at the core, it's about these quote-unquote securities, unregistered securities, the way they deem it. And again, they find that this is within their law to do this, which is crazy to me. I mean, a little bit ago, you could have tried to put up an argument towards me of saying, you know what, the SEC has won most of their cases, so they must understand the system and they must be onto something. But the moment they lost in the Ripple case, with regards to XRP, I noticed these guys don't know what they're doing. They're just trying it for the sake of getting big headlines and hoping that all these companies will just quit. I mean, almost any single lawyer we've spoken to knows just how stupid the SEC's briefs have been. Yet to ask myself, what could be their purpose? Why would they want these platforms to go down? Because inherently, Coinbase here is making things a lot safer for American investors than unsafe. Really start thinking about it. Why would you go against Coinbase for facilitating transfers rather than, at the core, by the way, not saying they're doing strange things with the funds, they're frauding people, defrauding people, but no, just saying, hey, some of the things they're trading should not be allowed, but then not go specifically against every single one of these companies. No, just go after the one facilitating it. It's kind of weird, but that's the way the US often works. Yet, I think it's really weird for the agency to say that that's where investors get hurt. Like they wouldn't just find another place to buy these assets then, but then don't have the courage to just go after all these assets in different jurisdictions. I mean, obviously it's quite difficult for them to do so, which brings up the point. They probably shouldn't be touching that then. Go after real fraudsters, go after people that commit fraud, that actually try to defraud investors literally, but no. Or go after your own administration. Like I said, had they brought up really strong cases, I might not be saying this, but for the most part, it just seems like a bullying campaign for the crypto space. I mean, I don't think the SEC thinks they can win. They're just doing this for delaying the whole crypto space advancing forward. And the more you read into it, guys, trust me when I say this, the more you read into this, the more you realize there's almost no value in the majority of things that they state. On the one hand, they're saying, hey, we're protecting the US investors. On the opposite end, they're stabbing every single one of them in the neck with a freaking serrated dagger. Stuart RLT, the CLO of Ripple, said, there is so much wrong with the SEC's brief in the Coinbase case. I don't know where to begin. Let's start with the SEC claiming, without citation or support, that digital assets have no innate or inherent value, while collectible baseball cards do. Why are they saying that? Just to try prove a point? I mean, a judge that's like, 75 years old might fall for that. Anybody with, 17 IQ or more would probably understand that the rules here were made in the 1930s and don't apply, and that physical, or I should say albeit physical, but collectible baseball cards in a lot of ways are just the same as an NFT collection, and that if that can have value, then why can't digital assets? I mean, is a Pokemon card different just because it's a digital Pokemon card or digital baseball card? Is that really differently in terms of value just because it has no intrinsic value? It's going to be an interesting one when you ask them if the dollar has real value. I mean, we can have a discussion here about what value really is. Does the SEC have value? No, but all jokes aside, I really feel as if the SEC is doing a lot of this purely, like for example, against Ripple, purely to give these more established banks and partners of guys at the SEC, for example, and SEC-related law firms, a chance at the big shots, at the big league. Think about it like this. Let's say you work at the SEC, right? Or you know some people, and, well, these guys have a annual salary of about $200K, but you've got yourself a good connection to a law firm that's already paying you, and they're willing to pay, $10 million, $15 million, $60 million over the next year or two. If you just, kind of go with their flow a little bit and you don't hurt their plans, all you got to do is, stop the competitors a little bit in the most, nonchalant way possible. I mean, we've seen it with William Hinman. A lot of the things he did were kind of weird, kind of wacky, that makes no sense unless you start relating it back to whatever he could have gained from it with regards to his Ethereum free pass. But here as well, why would you hold Ripple back? Well, perhaps because JP is building some sort of platform along those lines. You might say, well, they would have, if that was the case, also tried pushing Ethereum back. Ethereum is still not a non-security. They just have not touched it yet, potentially because guys like Bill Hinman were there basically first to put their foot in the door to get Ethereum the free pass, until now it would be in their best interest to try stop Ethereum, now that Hinman doesn't have the lobbying type of control over it anymore, and there's an incentive somewhere else from some other member here. I'm just putting up some balls. I wanted to say some thoughts, not sure why I said balls. I guess sometimes you start thinking about things that are not really around, right, but that you'd like to have, and I kind of felt like Gary Gensler for a moment, I guess, because he's got none. You understand the drift? Anyway, I must say that it's not as if these things only happen in the US, but as I described in many of my videos, the way they're so actively hunting these crypto projects in the US makes me extremely suspicious of what is going on in the background. Many people have asked me as well, Dusty, what would happen to the crypto space if Coinbase wins? Well, the thing is, it kind of depends on what different ranks they win on. Do they win on the idea that every single asset on Coinbase is fine, can be traded? Or do they win on the idea that Coinbase itself is not inherently doing anything wrong, as far as they know, these assets are good, and the SEC should take it up with those assets and just specifically ban each asset and file an appropriate lawsuit against that company? But then Coinbase can continue on, and we're going to have to establish every single currency out there. Will the judge Rightfully so. Explained that Coinbase is not in the wrong because they've asked the SEC for permission to list every single crypto, and the SEC was never against it. Like, for example, with XRP. Coinbase didn't list XRP until like 2019, after a lot of trouble and after a lot of rigorous tests, which were approved for the most part by the SEC. So can you really blame them then? Same thing for the 𝗲 product. Coinbase was able to IPO, and they had their 𝗲 and everything like that. Why was that let through then? I mean, every single one of those parts will play a big role in, I think, how the next crypto bull market will look. Because I think if the SEC loses on every single one of these fronts, it's going to be so much harder for them to go after different crypto companies, even though I think every single lawsuit here, they'll try to appeal and will most likely not be able to be used as precedent in most other cases for right now. Soon enough, though, I think the SEC will build up such a track record of losing in the crypto space. Well, for us losing, right? They might actually make it sound like a win like they did with the Ripple case, because they still might get some, couple hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of fines. But the major points that we care about, they'll lose. I mean, right now, the most people are just looking at the whole FTX debacle. And you can kind of, I guess, get back on that one saying, why didn't the SEC interfere there? Because they had so much oversight, right? They had so much information, especially if they wanted to, with the connections between Sam Bankman-Fried and Gary Gensler. And like I say in many of my videos, why not go after real bad guys instead of trying to destroy this entire industry? If they really wanted to save it, they would have let a framework out day one. Boom. Every single crypto that doesn't follow this framework, bam, you're a security. Not just say, hey, you know what? Let's use these 100-year-old rules. Why not just make one more offer of saying, hey, you know what? Let's change those rules slightly to apply to something, 100 years newer in a completely different era. And I know the SEC can't make rules themselves, but go through the rulemaking process, or at least show that you're willing to inform the people. Because right now it's a middle line of people don't understand what the frick's going on, yet you're going after them. Yet nobody really understands what you're going after them for, because every case is slightly different and slightly stupider. We don't understand your goals because nobody really trusts your agency anymore. I mean, even guys at the Financial Services Committee are saying, let's subpoena Gary Gensler, let's get him questioned. And some others are saying, let's get him thrown out because they don't trust what's going on here. Can you imagine that you don't trust the agency that's supposed to handle this multi-trillion-dollar, perhaps even you can call it quadrillion-dollar industry, or multiple industries, I should say? How is that still a thing? I do not know. I guess it's because Gary Gensler is too powerful to be taken down, and nobody wants to be responsible for taking him down. It's going to be an interesting battle when somebody else gets president, and they might choose a new chair. It's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen then. But that's not happening today just quite yet. And for right now, all I'll say is this. This case is pure garbage. But so is basically almost any crypto case right now. Except for the ones that are pretty obvious they're fraud, And I think that a track record is being built now that the SEC will lose most of the battles that they're trying to go for. And yes, it might take some time before most of these fruits have ripened, but they're growing, right? They're growing on that tree. They're becoming so succulently colorful, full of moisture, and ready to be juicy. But give it some time. So if you're wondering what's going on in the Coinbase lawsuit, shenanigans, same old, same old. What will happen if Coinbase wins, loses, whatever? Same old, same old. SEC is going to label it as a win, even though it's a loss, regardless of the outcome, actually. And crypto might not be further just because the back end is too freaking corrupt. Well, allegedly corrupt. Let's always put the allegedly there because, well, they're not trying to expose that it is, but I'd say they're not denying it either because it's impossible, kind of. But you know what? That's it for right now. Just wanted to quickly bring to y'all's attention that even though we all notice it's so stupid, it's just continuing on. It's just getting worse and worse by the day. And they're even getting support. I don't know why this is even a thing. But yeah, every single time I look at it, I'm thinking, this is the stupidest stuff in the crypto space. But it's a big thing. And I've also noticed I like law a lot more than I ever thought. It's so interesting to see all these different lawyers and different people that know law or claim to know law discuss these things because of how vague it is. And that brings up the point that I said at the start here. It's just too vague, and it's kept that way deliberately. I mean, many things in the world are kept vague deliberately, but this one is just stupid because you can't claim to want to protect individual investors, the simpletons, the people that just buy some crypto, for the sake of it, right? For the fun. But also try to make it as difficult as humanly possible for anybody to understand, even if they're a lawyer. And that's my take on this.